With the winter months behind us, we have a lot of chores that we need to be doing with our flowering shrubs or perennials in our garden. To start with, though, I want to make sure that you clarify the difference between spring flowering and summer flowering. And here we have a forsythia that is spring flowering, and azalea would be another example. Those particular plants that are spring flowering, you want to wait and prune those right after they're through flowering. But some of our late summer and fall flowering plants like crepe myrtle, now is the time to come in and do some pruning. Now with the crepe myrtle here in Oklahoma, most of the time the winter gets so cold that it actually kills all the top back and it grows up from suckers from the ground. But sometimes we have a mild winter and you can actually get a little bit more height on your plant by waiting and pruning. In other words, it's still a little bit too early if you want to get height. Wait and watch and see if you get any new growth that breaks from these canes. If so, all you'll need to do is just top them out. But if you want a lower growing plant and also it's damaged, you'll just go in and you can cut them back to the ground about 4 inches, and that can be done this time of year. Now we've got our mums over here, and the mums, believe it or not, were a beautiful yellow color last year, and they have grown up, and it's time to cut those off, and we've done that. And really you want to try to leave those as late as you can, because that helps insulate the crown here. And you can see we had 3 different clumps of the chrysanthemums, and we've just dug those up, and you can see the root ball size here. And we will transplant those into other areas of the garden because they're really getting too big and competing with some of our other plants. In front of us here, we've got some of the irises. And the irises, again, are a spring blooming bulb. So you want to make sure that you divide those up in the late summer, but it's still okay to go in and pull up some of the leaves and the diseased or the winter-killed foliage and clean them up a little bit. Try to be careful not to damage them too much so they don't affect the foliage. Another one that I want to talk to you about is Shasta daisy. And we've got some of those planted right here in the front of our bed. They really bloom in the late summer as well, mid to late summer. So now is the time to divide those up as well. And we've dug one up here to show you. To start with, we had several of the leaves dried up in some of the ocanes, and we pruned them out, and we've got just a little bit of new growth coming up. So we've got a pretty good sized clump there. Now to divide that up, all you're going to need to do is just take a shovel and just split it in half. And it's a real simple procedure. And then we're going to move them back a little bit because of the size. And that way you can split them up and space them out a little bit better. As you fill them in with the soil, you want to make sure that you water them. And really you don't need to put any fertilizer on until after the plants have started growing, and then you can come in and side dress them a little bit. I'd also like to show you some more plants that we have in this bed. This is our butterfly bush, or Buddleia, and it was one of our favorite ones last year with a nice purple flower, attracted a lot of butterflies. It's kind of similar to the crepe myrtle in that sometimes it gets killed back to the ground, so you may want to watch and see if you get any new growth. Otherwise, you may have to cut it back. So we're going to wait a little bit and see if we can get some height to it, and we'll probably thin it out a little bit and make sure that we get some good air circulation so we'll get a lot of flowers. But it blooms a little bit later in the season as well. Now, as I'm going over to some other plants, I want to point out that we've had a visit with our friendly deer again. This happened over the weekend, and they've come in, and one of their favorite crops is tulips, and they have pretty much mowed them down to the ground. So we're going to have to try to construct a protective cage or try to spray them with some kind of a repellent and protect those blooms because they're just starting to come out. The last thing that we have over here is our peony or peony, depending on which part of the area you're from. People pronounce it different ways. But again, it's one of our later blooming flowers. It is a perennial, and it's a little bit more of a shrub in the fact that it has a great big root system on it that you can see here. And we've divided this up again because, as you can see, this was our top growth, and we've got a lot of leaves and dead cane growth. We cut those back, dug up our ball, and we'll actually move it to the back of our bed because we've got too much height here in the front and we'll want to plant it for a little bit more lower growing plant material. But the peonies, again, are a late summer blooming plant. And so again, that's what you need to decide is it spring flowering? If so, we need to wait till after they're through. If they bloom in late summer, now's the time to go ahead and do it. But after we get our bed cleaned out here, this is some extra space and we'll be sure and put in a lot of annuals for color. And we'll keep you up to date on how that goes.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.